Our next speaker is Aslam Perwaiz, the Executive Director of the ADPC. You have the floor, sir.
Good afternoon. I realize that I'm the last speaker from this podium today, so I must speak something which you can remember and take home as well. Of course, since morning we have been talking about it, but just on this photograph that if you look at it, this is not me, by the way, on that one. This is certainly not me, but my presentation and my discussion today is actually about this. I am Aslam Perwaiz. I come from South Asia, precisely from India, but for the last 20 years, Southeast Asia has been my home, which is Bangkok, Thailand, a beautiful place. I hope you have visited, or I will invite you to visit. But today I am looking east, means further east in this whole East Asia Cooperation Forum to share with you some of my practical experience how climate and disaster has made countries to do cooperation both at the national level and regional level. But first of all, let me thank Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Korea, for taking up this. You know, since morning we have been talking about unilateralism, imperialism, cooperation, non-cooperation, but this is one subject perhaps you won't be able to avoid without cooperating, and this is exactly what I really would like to speak. But let me quickly remind ourselves where were we. I think just last couple of months, starting from March, you have been seeing the wildfires, correct, in the southern part, and I know that there are fatalities, but more than the fatalities, there's a huge cost to the government and for the public assets. Maybe just let's go back to last year, November, December. Korea never saw that kind of snowstorm, I think, based on, whatever the last 50 years. Maybe let me share with you the country that I live, Bangkok. On the last week of March, we had an earthquake of unimaginable scale for Bangkok, because in Bangkok 2025, before 2025, we never thought earthquake to Bangkok. Maipan Rai means no problem, like the way we call it in Bangkok. Before 2011, we never thought flood. Oh no, Bangkok, we will not be affected. I used to live on a 19th floor building, but I could not get out for the next 2 days because the whole area was flooded. Before 2005, Bangkok thought tsunami, never heard of. And this is exactly what we are seeing. So over the period of time, and I think our two scientist colleague, and as well as my colleague from GGI, they very well explain you the science, the cause of how disaster over the period of time has made it so difficult. But more importantly, while we are dealing with climate change, one thing that I personally have over the period I've seen, that our air is not that pure that used to be. Air pollution is going to be one of the biggest challenge, biggest problem, particularly in this east part of Asia very soon, where it will combine with human health and have a major impact. That is why we talked about it. I think I was in Beijing just 2 weeks ago. People say that never ever saw that kind of heat on that particular month. That means over the period of time, the accelerators for disaster risk are increasing. I will not repeat all that one, because today I really wanted to share with you what is all about regional cooperation. But without statistics, it will be impossible to relate to the assumption that regional cooperation and particularly the leadership of East Asia is very, very important. That is my assumption, presumption. I want to be right at the end of my presentation. When you look at overall Asia, comprise of 80% of the disaster globally, Damage-wise, much more than that, 90% of the damages. But this region, East Asia or Northeast Asia, is not behind. You are actually mirroring a lot of the problem that is happening across the border in Asia and Pacific. So combining Korea, Japan, and China, and Taiwan and Russia, combining the larger North and Northeast Asia, you are not that behind in terms of disaster risk. I think we heard about flood, storm, but drought is another biggest problem. And if you look at some of the statistics that, more than 2 trillion in damages in the Asia and Pacific, which is close to 68% of the total disaster damage. And imagine if it is 68% in Asia and Pacific, where most of the poverty-ridden countries are equally affected. Imagine that how much time it will take for them to recover. I'll just go through some of those recent years. I think last year we saw the zoos problem in Mongolia. Drought I already mentioned, but I think both typhoon, the earthquake of 2011, but the recent combining one. If you put all that together, one thing is very clear, that despite all the scientific innovation, the frequency and intensity of disaster in East Asia and Northeast Asia have intensified in the recent year. And that's certainly reflecting the impact of climate change. Let me just avoid all these slides, not important, but this is exactly what I wanted to address with you, that why it is important for the East Asia leadership and cooperation in disaster and climate resilience. There are many platforms, and I think some of them I just missed deliberately, but currently I think in the morning we found that this is a golden opportunity by the Korean government's presidency of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation to discuss. We do have both climate change and emergency preparedness as a core element, which we will be discussing towards the end of the month. But at the Asia-Pacific level, where Korea plays a very important role, the Ministry of Interior and Safety of this Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. You hosted that meeting way back in 2009. We also have a lot of geopolitical formation. I think we talked about it. I will not go, but within G7, G8, and G20, Korea is one of the prominent person raising both economic cooperation and disaster vulnerability from time to time. East Asia Cooperation Forum, I think most of you inside the room knows. Let's say a lot of the people on the South Asia side may not know, but we at Asian Disaster Preparedness Center very carefully examining all those contributions that you have been making. But today I will just want to share with you, because that I come from an institute which for the last 20 years has been emphasizing the role of regional platforms and regional cooperation. We call it Regional Consultative Committee on Disaster Management, established actually in the year of 2000, where neither the ASEAN Committee for Disaster Management, neither the South Asia Disaster Management, and many other ones were not there. At that time, since then, we have been promoting disaster risk reduction. Korea, for sure, is the founding member country. The Ministry of Interior and Safety participate. Now, what we generally do in that one is to help each of the member countries understand what are the future risks and how they actually can cooperate among each other. Besides, as I think in the morning, I was very impressed by our speaker from Malaysia. I think, sir, you are sitting here. The way, sir, you explain the spirit of ASEAN and why it is indispensable is exactly the thing, is that we really don't care about confrontation too much when it comes to helping each other. And I think the acute example is Myanmar. We have great difficulty in terms of politics and other things. But when the earthquake happened on 28th of March, I think the entire ASEAN community put all their efforts there. And this is exactly how it helps one ASEAN, one response, or this larger ASEAN Regional Forum activity. So Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, we are actually cooperating with a large number of platforms in terms of improving the collaboration despite our geopolitical confrontation, which is not the subject for disaster professionals, because what we know that disaster does not recognize boundaries. So we do not know what is south, what is north. Like, for example, I'm very much involved in this SONOSA, which perhaps you would know, the South-North Cooperation Engagement Association, through which we do a lot of activities together to influence, to reach out to people besides our problems on a day-to-day basis on the politics. Very quickly, a large number of programs under the Regional Consultative Committee are being facilitated for the last 20 years, together with the technology from Korea, Japan, and United States. We actually connect a lot of the village disaster risk investment programs using the space technology. And in a large number of South Asian countries, I think we can discuss and share it with you later. We do a lot of the work by engaging the private sector, the non-government organization, and the government organization. So what we call is a trilateral arrangement where private sector, government, and non-government decides what kind of risk reduction program that they would take. We also look at all-inclusive program, means within the society, whether this is the economically marginalized people, socially marginalized people, or physically disabled people. We work together to help the disaster risk reduction should have all society approach. Now, this is overall to contribute the global commitment that all the 192 plus countries came. We call it Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Very key lessons from Asia and Pacific, I very quickly go into this one. One is that, I made COVID as one of the baseline, because COVID, in terms of the global attention and just below a catastrophe as per the definition, I think this is one of the disaster, if you call it, if you can call, that we were completely unprepared for. Although Southeast Asia, and we had seen SARS, but we were not really prepared what we saw during the COVID time, and just imagine the kind of loss. When we are looking at how disaster and climate things happens in the country, generally your risk reduction policies, your strategies, your framework, pre-COVID one, we were not really fully aware how to include very future risks that we are not fully aware, but the science tells us that there are future risks. We were not really prepared for that much of a pandemic issue that we faced. Second one is this risk-informed approaches, and I think this is where we learn from Japan that, how you put a lot of efforts in investigating how risk can affect your policy decisions. And I think from this one, it is not only at the national level, but both at the local and regional level, we really have to bring risk investigation. And one thing here, we must understand that risk awareness does not necessarily mean that you have started doing risk-informed investment. It is an awareness so far, but I think in terms of the financing, I was there in Sevilla recently under this Financing for Development Corporation. I think you require more than $3 trillion in the next 20 years for your climate-related risk. You don't even have 20% ready yet. Very quickly, in terms of this implementation challenges at the national and local level, I think we still have this stigma that most of our efforts gets limited into the national level. By the time we reach at the local level, most of our resources get finished. And this is where I think we fail, because they are the first responder. Local governments are the first one who has to decide what they need to actually do. The fourth one, I think we talk about it, and I actually came here to learn a little bit more, and I think the session 2 today, how we use science, innovation, and technology. At ADPC, we are based on a scientific innovation, but we actually bring the science-based information strengthening the government system, and I think AI is the present and going to be the future when we make risk-informed decision. The last slide, very quickly, 26 seconds here. What are the opportunities? And I think to me, I think this leadership by East Asia, combining Korea, Japan, and China, let's say move to further Russia and others, has an important role to play. And to this, I think my request to the international development aid agencies of these three primary countries is that, invest a little bit more on the preparedness rather than on responding to disaster, because a lot of your program, whether it is COICA, whether it is JICA and others, let's spend more time on investment on preparedness. The last one, I think I'm just wishing that this East Asia Cooperation Forum flourishes further, takes more disaster-related issues and actually does a real regional cooperation. So thank you very much and very happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Aslam, for delivering outstanding presentation. I think the four presentation by our four speakers, I think all of them are interesting, informative, and instructive. In particular, the rich information on region-specific climate change is compelling and thought-provoking. Well, you have just concluded the first part of the session. As I said at the outset, I wish to begin the Q&A session. And then also I wish to share one common question to speakers from international organizations. Actually, I circulated this question prior to our session. My question is as follows. The East Asia is a region of diversity with a profound interconnections, even though there are some differences from country to country in terms of magnitude, frequency, the type of climate risk and disasters. We have a common responsibility for strengthening our adaptive capacity and resilience. What do you think will be the most practical and viable approach for facilitating regional cooperation in this field? For instance, we may use existing institutions or regional programs by extending their mandate, or we may launch new initiatives in this area by translating relevant global action plan into regional one. Or you may suggest any innovative approach for strengthening regional cooperation. Any suggestion will be welcomed. Well, regarding my questions, who will take the floor first? Aslam or Kang? Yes.
Take up?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think since I already spoke a lot about cooperation, and then I would remind you from the first session, I think for regional cooperation, the same model of ABC, since you are here, would need it. What does it mean is assess regionally, A, B, broadcast regionally, C, cooperate regionally. And I just made it up. I did not really apply too much in my mind. When I'm looking at it in terms of this Asia and Pacific, and particularly the contribution of East Asia, I can give you thousands of examples of ASEAN for sure, because I have been there for 20 years. But when I'm looking at some of the strong point on the East Asia, I think you have a lot to assess, both internally as well as for the countries that you cooperate. There's a lot to be known about the strength of, let's say, the Korea Meteorological Agency, a lot to be known outside. And cooperate, I think, that is the most important part, that as in the first session we say that for cooperation, whether you need alignment or alliances. But I believe that whatever it makes you to cooperate, and that actually would help you to build partnership, and we call it alliance and alignment, we call it more as partnership in disaster risk action. That is the most important part, and I believe that Korea has a greater role, Korea has a greater opportunity to be in that partnership, to do a lot, because the kind of contribution you are doing in sub-regional one, like in the Mekong, like in the ASEAN, this ASEAN-Korea, or the Korea-Mekong one, I think this actually gives a lot of example for us that, how given a chance, a country on East Asia can actually help other country build partnership on a sub-regional and regional basis. So for me, I think the same ABC formula, if we apply on the session 3, we would achieve the future of cooperation, which is what this forum is all about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, during the climate change negotiation, I got a lot of the questions. What is your main role in the negotiation process? Of course, Korea's main role is how to play the bridging role or catalytic role for making a breakthrough. So, as you said, well, in this area, also Korea, Japan, China, I think 3 Northeast countries can make some positive role in consolidating the regional cooperation in addressing the climate change. Now, I wish to open floor to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and identify yourself and indicate which speaker you are posing a question. Yes, please. On the first row. Yeah.
죄송합니다. 제가 영어
Yes, I don't speak English, so I ask for your understanding. So I have a question for Executive Director Perwaiz. Now, in relation to climate cooperation, let me first introduce myself, however. I am working with the Army. I'm an officer, and in relation to cooperation for climate within ASEAN, probably there are non-cooperating nations or nations that really don't cooperate well when you work with ASEAN countries. So in order to promote cooperation among these countries, when you are working with them, if you are having difficulty having them engage, what is the best way to induce cooperation from them? If you have some advice, that would be very helpful.
Aslam, did you get the point of the question?
Yes, I got
Okay, in this
I get
case,
the point.
I don't need the
Thank you very much. No, luckily I had a very good translator coming into my to my ear. So thank you very much. I think the question or the curiosity from my colleague from the Army is that what you do if somebody do not cooperate. If this is how I realize. I think in your job profession, what you will do if somebody do not cooperate is very different in my job profession, because in the Army, in the front line, if somebody do not cooperate, either you shoot them or you just fire them. But in the international development cooperation, and you give this example of ASEAN, persistence, patience, working with the weakness has been the biggest advantage. Am I right, sir? Because when I'm looking at ASEAN, let's say, first of all, I do not come from ASEAN, but I love a number of things because I have been there for 20 years. When I'm looking at these 10 countries, perhaps maybe very soon 11, they have all different type of diversity, and imagine that today or yesterday, even tomorrow, if you watch both Cambodia and on Thailand newspaper, you will find that they have problems on the border. But when you will see that another country gets affected, both Cambodia and Thailand will team up together with this ERA team and go there. So just to answer is that in disaster cooperation, in emergency cooperation, I think you have to leave aside your political belongings and the baggage. This is one. The second one is patience is the most important. Otherwise, we would not have seen so much growth in Myanmar if everyone in the ASEAN region would have lost patience with them. Of course, these are all flips and flops. So patience also is very, very important. And the last one, I think, is about how you educate your next generation. And this is where I think we lack a lot, because we are currently tend to promote a lot of the things which we do not want our current generation or the next generation to understand fully. So it is important that, disaster education or education on disaster resilience is provided both in textbooks as in practical, so that people would know and then make their decision based on that. I hope I did justice to the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, one country decided to cooperate with another country. I think a mutual expectation is very important. If one country meets the other country's expectation, they can build trust. It's a confidence building. And this is the situation where they continue to cooperate. I think this is my personal, in a sense, assessment about the mutual cooperation in international scene.
Hi, I'm Kayon Kim, and I come from a background in Chinese language and literature and also East Asian studies at Yonsei University. And my question goes to the last speaker. You've shared some projects like capacity building and digital resilience programs. Do you see improving climate literacy, helping communities better understand climate-related risk as just as important as strengthening disaster preparedness? And how does your organization integrate climate literacy into its core activities? Thank you.
So I was the last speaker, okay. So thank you very much. I just came back from, from China. I'm also a very curious learner on East Asia, so that's why all the time that I speak. Maybe I can share with you the details of my organization today. I did not want to promote my organization than the subject, but our service delivery, most of the disaster preparedness activities that we do, or largely the other organization do, is primarily focused on building capacities. Now, ours is primarily targeting to the government, national, subnational, and the local one. To build disaster capacity, I think the very basis is that what you really want to build and how you want to build. What we do generally is that we collect all the good lessons. Like, for example, as I said, that in China, currently, they have one of the best, what they call cloud-based early warning system program. I'm not saying that others do not have, but when I read, I found this is one of the best utilization of AI and cloud-based technology. What we do is that we actually bring back in our institution, we develop certain modules, discuss with a lot of the experts, and then we start teaching by inviting people or webinars. So I truly believe, and you rightly said. Another one is what we see is that, improving investment in disaster research, and thanks to a lot of the program, both Korea and Japan, that they give a lot of fellowships, and this is where we actually work with a large number of universities to take topics on disaster and climate, and this is how we do. So I certainly echo your one that, if you really want our political leaders and others to really know about disaster preparedness, the way we can increase is have more and more capacity development program, because which is very tangible. People would know how they receive the the expertise and then how they actually utilize. And we do it, and I can share with you our programs in a bilateral discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Aslam. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to conclude our session by sharing some remarks recently made by the UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program Executive Director, about climate and environmental diplomacy. I quote, "Environmental multilateralism, sometimes messy and sometimes arduous, But even in complex geopolitical times, collaboration across borders and across our differences is the only option to protect the foundation of humanity's existence, unquote. This afternoon, we had a very constructive exchange of information and experiences about climate-related disasters. I wish to extend my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for your insightful contributions and active participation. Our objective today was clear, is to explore how regional countries can strengthen their cooperation in enhancing adaptive capacity and resilience in times of climate disruption. The path to enhance the adaptive capacity and resilience is a shared journey. Our session has not only highlighted the imperative of regional cooperation, but also has laid the groundwork for tangible next steps. We have seen a strong consensus on urgent need for working together. I sincerely hope that our discussion serves as a valuable input to further cooperation. Once again, I thank you all for your active participation.
And with that, we sincerely thank all participants for staying with us until the very last moment. And of course, we'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to our online participants on YouTube channel. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the East Asia Cooperation Forum 2025. Thank you very much and goodbye.